Welcome. My name is Matt Feldman. This is Noah, and that's Ella. Ella, your face is right in the camera. Can you come over here? Can you come over here? And they're going to be helping me today. And we're going to go over Texas-style brisket. So I've got some slides that I'm going to kind of walk through and then do some stuff at the same time. So if you do have any questions, just stop me in the middle and ask. And yeah, so let's get started. Okay, again, my name is Matt Feldman, and I've got Ella and Noah with me. Are going to be helping. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of background. And so there's many styles of barbecue, brisket. There's St. Louis, there's Memphis, there's Texas, many different, throughout the country. So my favorite is Texas barbecue. My wife is from Texas, and that's the kind that I enjoy the most. So here just is an overview of the 4 different kinds of barbecue and brisket within the state of Texas itself. So there's East Texas, which is a slow cooked brisket, and it's more of a like a chopped with sauce kind of based, smoking on hickory wood. Central Texas, which is my personal favorite, and the one that I'll be kind of going through today. That's with mainly just salt and pepper on the meat, using a pecan or oak wood. I prefer a post oak wood when I smoke. There's a West Texas, which is a hot over mesquite wood, and then a South Texas, which is kind of a braising in a molasses type of sauce. So what I will do is, like I said, I'm going to go through like a Central Texas style. I'm also going to talk a little bit about a barbecue sauce that is tomato based. Throughout the presentation, there are a bunch of recipes and everything. So I'm going to kind of give a high overview. And if anyone has any questions, like I said, jump in and just ask. All right. So the different kind of cooking methods that I'm going to talk about here are an oven, a sous vide, and using a traditional smoker. So one method is doing it in an oven. It's probably the most common way that people have access to making a brisket. Also a sous vide, if anyone's not familiar with what a sous vide is, but a sous vide is a water immersion bath, basically, that you put meat that's been vacuum sealed in a bag or in a glass container, and you cook it for an extended period of time at a consistent temperature, and it breaks down and not marinates.
Connect to your phone.
Yes, and softens the meat. So you can come out basically with the perfect temperature, and then usually you sear meat after that. But it's a little bit different when it comes to brisket, but I'll talk about that as well. And then the traditional smoker. And there's many different kinds of smokers. I'll just briefly touch on some of them here that are the most common. An offset smoker looks like a normal grill, but it's got a small box on the side where you would put in chunks of wood that would burn and smoke throughout the chamber. Kamado grill is what I use. Most commonly, a Big Green Egg is the brand that most people are familiar with. I use a Primo, which is pretty much the same thing. It's an American-made Kamado grill, and it's made of ceramic. So insulates really well, keeps the temperature, keeps that consistent temperature throughout the cook. So it's really good to use for that. And then pellet grills are pretty common with a lot of people. They're really easy to use. A Traeger is the most common one, or a Green Mountain, where you use pellets, and you basically set the temperature, and it has a hopper that you fill up with these pellets, and it has an auger, and it feeds it, and it keeps that consistent temperature without having to watch over it. So that's typically how a pellet grill works. So those are the most common versions of smokers. And again, I'm going to touch on all 3 of these methods throughout the presentation. All right, so choosing your meat and cut. So a brisket, obviously it's from a cow. So if I were a cow, the brisket would be like right here, basically. And this is a small piece of one. It's not a full, what they call a packer, like on the right there.
Is it a full grown cow?
Yes. So if you were to go and to either Costco or a butcher and got what they call a packer brisket, that's one of the really big ones that you might see when you go to Costco in the meat chest. And what that is it's broken up into 2 pieces. There's the point and the flat. The flat is the longer, skinnier part of the brisket. It's the most common if you were to go to a grocery store and purchase one. It's usually about this size. This is probably, I had a bigger one that I trimmed down. This one here is probably, I don't know, like 2.5, maybe, probably 2.5, 3 pounds maybe, the one that I've got here. And that's a flat. And the difference really is the point is the fattier piece of meat. It's one that's typically used for what's called burnt ends, which is another style of cooking pieces of brisket. And the flat is the most common, like if you go to a grocery store. So typically the way it is that you have your large piece, you have your large flat, and then on top on it with a layer of fat in between is the point. So a lot of times those two are separated after cooking or prior to cooking, depending on what you're trying to do. So when you do order a Packer style full brisket, it usually has a lot of fat on it, and usually requires a lot of cutting to get that taken off. Usually when you get a flat from a grocery store or a butcher, it's usually trimmed pretty well, so you don't have to worry about trimming it down too much. And then on the bottom, I'm just highlighting, there's different grades of meat. Most commonly you find choice and prime as well. When it comes to smoking and slow cooking, there's not a huge difference between a choice and a prime. A prime brisket is fattier. It does have more flavor. So it can be a little bit better, but the choice is just as good. And if you're getting into smoking and everything and you are practicing, definitely don't spend the extra money on the prime until you've kind of got it down pat. So that's kind of the anatomy of a brisket. And yeah, so any questions so far? Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna take a break here from the presentation, and I'll kind of show you what I've got with this brisket here. So this is a prime brisket. This one, like I said, probably was, the larger one was about 13 pounds, and I cut it down. I cut the point off of it, and I just have the flat here. I've got right here, I cooked earlier today, a piece of it, and then I have the piece for demonstration here. Like I said, when you get the, thank you, Noah. When you get a full pack of brisket that's not trimmed, there's usually a pretty big, thick layer of fat on it, as well as on the sides, there's a lot of hard fat, which needs to be trimmed off. So when you have a full brisket, there's a lot of trimming along the edges of the hard fat, and there's also what they call silver skin, which when you look at it, it kind of glistens a little bit. You want to try to cut some of that off as well. So, but what you're left with, when you're left with this piece like right here, you want to leave about a quarter to a half an inch of fat here. So this piece that I've got here, I trimmed it a little bit, but still, like right over here, I still have some fat that I want to trim off. So use a boning knife works best for that. So let's see, and a little silver skin here. All right. All right. Since this one was trimmed previously, this one looks pretty good right now. So not too bad. Hands off. And pretty much if you leave any of the fat on, a lot of it can be trimmed off after. It's just a lot of the hard fat doesn't really render down at all. So it's best to just get rid of it through the beginning. Also, when you're trimming brisket, it's best to trim it right after you take it out of the fridge. As it sits on a counter like this one has for a little bit, it's a little harder to trim the fat. When it's cold, it's easier to cut. And then less chances of cutting yourself. I've cut myself many times. So it suggests doing it that way. So yeah, that's pretty much a trim brisket right here. So moving on next would be seasoning it. So I'll go back here, and there's many different types of rubs. You can pretty much rub it with whatever you want, really. So what I did is I took a couple basic ones here that I've used and I thought were pretty good. Like I said, Central Texas style is my favorite, and it's typically just a combination of 50% salt and pepper. That's all it is. Like I said, you can add whatever you want to it. The Central Texas style pretty much comes out of Czech and German immigrants in the 1800s that settled in Central Texas, and most of them were butchers that, and they opened up smokehouses, mainly to try to cook meat and preserve it so that it wouldn't go bad. So that's what started as the smokehouse. It's not very heavy in the sauce. I myself am not a huge fan of sauce. I like to have the meat the way it is with not a lot of sauce on it, especially a sweet sauce in general. So another rub here that I put in here is a sweet style, usually with brown sugar, salt, pepper. Can you not do that? Can I have that, please? And then also another one here that I've used, Texas A&M University has a, in their meat sciences department, they have a brisket summer camp, which is actually really hard to get into, and you have to apply for it. And I've been trying to get into it because it's a couple of days where you go and you learn all about meat and how to do the butchering and smoking and so on and so forth. So this is the recipe I had off of their site, and it's also another pretty good one. All right. So basically, when it comes to seasoning, you just liberally cover the top, the bottom, the sides. So Ella, do you want to do it? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can do some. You got to do a lot. Go. We got that side done. Perfect. And then do this side. Okay, that's good. Yeah, you want to pat it in to the meat here. Oh, there you go. Thank you. So this is, stop. Oh. And this one's ready to go right now. And also, when you're cooking, I use a thermometer to keep track of temperature. So I have one that connects to Wi-Fi. So I'm just gonna insert that right now. So basically, when you use one of these, you put it in the center of the meat. Insert it in. And then when I go out and plug it in, I'll connect the other side to the monitor. So,
what brand of thermometer do you use?
So Noah's actually holding one here, an instant read one that's really good. That's a Thermapen. The one that I have here is it's part of something called the Flame Boss, which is another piece that you'll see outside that connects to the grill. But it's escaping me the other brands that I know off the top of my head, but I can add those to the slides before they get sent out. But just in general for cooking purposes, one of these, a Thermapen or a Lava Tools are really, really good at instant read. And when you're cooking, you cook by temperature. So you don't overcook any meats or anything like that. So that's really useful for anything for burgers, chicken, fish. Fish is a little bit delicate, so you got to be careful with it. But for the most part, that's usually the most helpful. But like I said, I'll provide some other information. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll kind of go through the three different methods. And what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll switch back and we can go and I can do some demonstration. So for the smoker method, obviously, you need the brisket trimmed. You need the seasonings, the rub on it. You need a smoker, a meat thermometer, and I usually put a pan for water in there to keep the meat moist as it cooks. Some people spritz meat. It all depends. It's all preference, really. So pretty much like what I did right now, and I got this all ready to go, is how you prep it, and then you want to set a smoker between 200 and 250 degrees. And then 225 is usually what is kind of the golden rule for what you should be cooking at. And then rule of thumb, it takes about an hour and a half per pound to cook. But again, brisket is really, really finicky depending on how much fat there is. It could go through a period that it actually does take longer than that. It all depends. There's a couple different methods too that you can do. You can you please stop? You put the meat on the grill, on the smoker, and usually cook it to about 165, and you'll start to notice sometimes that you'll hit what's called the stall. And that's usually when a lot of the fat is starting to liquefy and it's cooling down the meat. So a lot of times what people do, unless you want to let it sit for 12, 18 hours, is they do what they call a Texas crutch, which means you wrap the meat when it's on the grill. And then what that does is that insulates and helps speed up the cooking. So there's kind of two different things you can do. You can wrap it in foil. The downfall of using foil is typically with smoked meat, there is kind of a crust that develops on the outside. The bark is what it's called. By using foil, it usually makes it a bit wet, so that bark gets kind of ruined. But another method that's used by a lot of pit masters, Aaron Franklin, one of the main ones in Austin, Texas, he uses what's called pink butcher paper. And what it does is it provides the same insulation to speed up cooking, but it's breathes enough that it allows for the bark to not get ruined. So like when Noah was showing this one here, this cooked one, this is the butcher paper. It's all soaked in grease right now, but that's it basically.
I took the temperature.
Yes, thank you. It's all about patience, really, when it comes to smoking. Usually if you smoke it to about between 190 and 200 degrees, you want to start taking, stop, can I do this?
No,
You want to take a fork or a probe like Noah's got in his hands, and you could poke at the meat. And once it starts to go through kind of like butter, that's when you know that you're ready. And the meat gets kind of jiggly too. But it's really hard to tell at that point. You can't go necessarily strictly by temperature. It's kind of by the feel of how it goes. And yeah, let's see. Yeah, so once you get to that point where you've gotten to the proper temperature and you've checked it, then you need to let the meat rest. So you want to take it off. You want to let it rest for about an hour and then slice against the grain before. Yes. What you can do also is while it's wrapped, you could put it in an empty cooler, which will also keep the meat warm. You could wrap it in a towel, put it in a cooler, and it'll actually stay warm for several hours before you're ready to go ahead and eat it. But yeah, one thing I forgot about setting up the smoker, depending on what kind of smoker you have, like for a Kamado, you light the charcoal and then you put chunks of wood on top of it. And when we go outside right now, I'll show you the setup, and then we'll come back in and we could talk about the other methods. So let me stop sharing on this. And Ella, do you want to carry it?
What's wrong with your thing?
Can everybody see? Can you come?
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so this is a Primo. It's a Kamado style grill. Like I said, it's made of ceramic. It's got a lot of insulation, so it holds the heat really well. Here's a chunk of post oak wood, which I order from Texas. And like I said, I light the coals and then I put this on top of it. No, you're in the way. So right now, since I was cooking the other brisket on it, there's no smoke billowing out of it right now. But what I would do is if I was to put the wood on the coals, it would start to smolder and it would generate the smoke. And the meat only absorbs the smoke for about 2 hours or so. And then in there, it might be hard to see, but there's a water pan with water in it to keep the meat moist. So what I'll do now is plop the meat on. And hook it up. So that right there is what I was referring to as the Flame Boss. And what it does is it has a fan down here that is helping regulate the temperature within the chamber. So it's basically kind of like a set it and forget it kind of thing that keeps it going. So, all right, let's go back inside. So moving on. Okay, so an oven method. If you don't have a smoker, there's a couple other ways. There's many other ways that you could do it. So first one, an oven. Everyone has an oven, so most common. And this is more of a smoky flavor kind of brisket. So the recipe I got here, you take that, basically that piece that I had, maybe a little bit bigger, rub it with whatever rub that you want is your preference. Put it in a pan, cook it uncovered at 350 for an hour. After that, take it out, then fill the bottom of the pan with about a half an inch of beef stock. And then what you can do at that time too is there's a product called liquid smoke. You can get it in any grocery store. You can also add a little bit of that in there to get more of the smoky flavor if that's what you're going after. So you can add some of that in there. So after that hour, you put the liquid in, cover it tightly in foil, and then put it back in the oven. Lower the temperature to 300, and then for a 4-pound brisket, you cook it for about another 3 hours. And then you want to check it and make sure that it's fork tender. When it comes to cooking brisket, especially on the smoker, there's a saying that if you're looking, you're not cooking. So when taking a step back to the smoker method, if you open up the smoker, you're losing the heat every single time. So it winds up taking longer. So you don't really want to look at it as much. Every couple hours, check on it, but mainly going by the temperature definitely will help out in doing that. So. And then I put another recipe in here too for an oven / crock-pot method for a sweet brisket. You know, Rosh Hashanah is coming up. So if you want to make a sweet brisket, this one uses either Dr. Pepper or Coca-Cola, depending on where you're from. I've seen recipes in Atlanta, obviously they use Coca-Cola, and in Texas they use Dr. Pepper, just because that's where they're from. So I prefer Dr. Pepper, so that's what I would use in this recipe. But very simple with this one.
You don't have Dr. Pepper.
I don't have Dr. Pepper right now. You put the meat in a pan again, 300 degrees, or in a crock pot. Season it with salt and pepper, or you can use whatever rub that you'd like to do. You can rub it with some garlic and red pepper flake. Red pepper flake is totally optional depending on how the level of heat that you want. Cover it with a bottle of like the Heinz chili sauce. Put sliced onions along the top of it, and then pour your cola in there. Then cover it and cook it in the oven, or cook it low in the crock pot. That's more of a, like I said, a sweet brisket method that I enjoy. So that's that method. And then a sous vide. So what I'll do is, for anyone that doesn't really know what a sous vide is too much, I'll kind of show you. I'm starting. Mine is controlled by our Wi-Fi. So let me stop sharing, and then what I can do is I'll come over and show you. No. So basically, a sous vide is this unit that's in. It usually goes in either a big pot or
Right.
no, stop.
In the pot.
Thank you. Or you can buy a larger container for bigger pieces of meat. Or I've even been seeing coolers where you cut a hole in the top and you put the sous vide in. But basically, what it's doing is it's circulating the water and heating it up. So it heats up the water to a specific temperature, and then you drop the meat in a vacuum sealed bag. So back here. Sorry to jostle y'all around, but I have the meat right here, and you basically go and drop it in. And when you're cooking sous vide, it usually takes a while. It takes a long time. When you're cooking things like steak, it's not very long, maybe 2 hours-ish. But for a brisket, you usually cook it for 24 to 36 hours at about 155 degrees. I think I have it on the slide. And what it's doing is it's cooking that at that consistent temperature and really making that meat moist and breaking down the fat and making it a really tasty piece of meat. So let me try. When you're done with the sous vide method, you can then put the meat on a smoker, or you could finish it in an oven. One way to get the smoky flavor if you want is you can add liquid smoke to it. But the way you prepare the brisket is the same way as the other methods. You put whatever rub you want in it, and then you put it in the bag. Usually just like a salt and pepper. When you cook it after, you can add more seasoning. Sometimes garlic acts a little bit funny in a sous vide. So I would stay away from that. So just salt and pepper is really the best thing to use before you put in a sous vide. Then once it's all done, you cool down the meat before you cook it again. That's because you cooked it at a consistent temperature and you don't want it to overcook. So you cool it down a little bit, and then you can take the piece of meat, you can put it on a pan and put it in the oven and finish it off that way, or you can put it on a smoker. I've only done this method once. It does come out very, very good, very moist. So it is another way of doing a brisket. So in the sous vide method. All right, and then before getting into sauce, are there any questions on the different methods of cooking, either on a smoker, oven, sous vide?
Actually, my question, Matt, this is Judy Weiser, is where did you buy your beef at?
That piece came from Costco. Obviously depends if you keep kosher, you can get it from a kosher butcher. But the larger cuts like that, I think Cash and Carry has large pieces like that. If you go to any butcher, they will give you that large cut. But if you want to get just the trimmed flat piece, you can get that at pretty much any grocery store, any butcher. Or if you wanted to get, if you keep kosher, you can get it from any of the supermarkets like QFC that carry kosher meat. So
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And you can also order online. There's many different places to order meat from. Yeah.
What cut do you get? Do you get the first cut? This is Evie Chestnut.
So I usually get what's called a packer, which is the full brisket. And then it has the two pieces, the flat and the point on it. The piece that like you would get mainly at a grocery store or anything is usually called the flat. So, and that one's best for when you do like that sweet brisket in an oven, or if you're trying to roast it. Usually the full piece is usually one that you would use on a smoker. But it's much easier to find the flat. So it depends on what you're doing, really.
I've used second cut for my briskets. For kosher meat, it's second cut.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
All right, and now I'll go over a barbecue sauce. I've got two that are in this presentation. One that's got more ingredients, and it's a tomato. They're both tomato based. This one uses tomato sauce. The other one uses ketchup. So I'll have my assistants here help me put some ingredients in. So Ella, which one do you want to do? Okay, you want to do here. Noah, you do the wet ingredients. Ella, you do the dry ingredients. Okay, so for the wet ingredients, tomato sauce. Hold on, not yet. Tomato sauce, and I have it just all measured out here. Worcestershire, vinegar, a little bit of hot sauce in there. So I like chipotle a lot. I like the smoky chipotle flavor, so I use chipotle hot sauce. You can use whatever hot sauce you want, or no hot sauce at all. So you want to pour them in? Pour in.
First, tomato sauce.
Okay, and then this is water.
Water. And then vinegar.
Yeah. And you can use apple cider vinegar. You can use white vinegar. A lot of recipes call for apple cider vinegar. And then Ella's got all the dry ingredients. So dry ingredients, brown sugar, onion powder, garlic powder, pepper, black pepper, paprika. It doesn't matter. Just put it in. Chili powder, dry mustard. You can also add some of the liquid smoke to this as well if you want more of that smoky flavor. So basically, mix that all together, simmer on the stove for half an hour. And then depending on what consistency you like, you can add more water or let it cook down further. So, and then here's another simple one. This one uses ketchup, so a lot of the seasonings are already in there. But again, water, vinegar, light brown sugar, Worcestershire, chili powder, some cayenne and salt. So, yeah. All right, so I'll stop to take any questions right now. I do have a brisket that's done here, so I will go ahead and go over kind of cutting it. So, and then like Ella just said, also eating it. But are there any other questions at this point? Okay, and before I get into that, I have my email address there. I love barbecue. I love to talk about barbecue. So if anyone has any questions, reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to spend the time talking about barbecue. And my wife loves to eat everything that I experiment with. Yeah, and let's see. Other things that are great. If anyone's ever had beef ribs before, those come out fantastic on a smoker or in a crock pot. The smoker's outside. But those are, and there's varying different kinds. Usually like the big Texas style, like they call like dinosaur ribs or something. Hold on.
We have 2 smokers.
Yes, I know that. Those are great, and those you can get from. They're usually not out in butcher cases or anything, but usually you have to request them. If you ask for plate ribs, that's what you would get, and those come out very tender, very easy to cook. So, but yeah, any questions before I start cutting?
How long do you smoke ribs for?
It depends on how big they are. Ribs are, I think the last ones I did were probably 5 pounds, including the bones. And I think it took about 6 hours. They don't take as long as brisket, and they're a lot more forgiving than brisket. Brisket, if you don't hit the sweet spot, you'll dry it out. When it comes to ribs, they're a lot more forgiving. So you basically cook those until you can take a fork or a probe and kind of stick it through like it's like Jello, and then those are done. So a lot more forgiving, and they're really tasty, really flavorful. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So now I'll go ahead and I'll cut this one up here. And like I said, this is a flat. This one came off of a full. And this is, like I said, this is, and it's dripping all over the place. This is that. Can you put this down? This is the pink butcher paper. You can order it on Amazon. If you want to give it a shot, I have a big roll of it. I'm more than happy to give you some. But let me get this unwrapped here. This is not a very big one. It's kind of like the other one. Can you give me the garbage can? No, it's right there. Noah doesn't like this part of it. Thank you. All right, just gonna rinse off because I stuck my hand in the garbage. Considering this is my family's dinner tonight, I should probably wash my hands.
Well, I'm not going to be at this.
Yes, you. No. Okay. So this right here is good. And when you kind of touch it, it kind of jiggles a bit. It's got a good bark on it. So now I'll go ahead and you want to cut it against the grain. You can use any knife. This is a specific brisket knife. But
You want me to get a fork?
That's like butter.
The big
Yep.
fork?
when you do it the right way,
The big
and you cut it about 1/4 of an inch. I don't need a fork, baby. Thank you.
No, just
I'll use a fork. Thank you.
it's fine.
Finish cutting up. You can kind of see, it's a little hard to see, but you can see there's a pinkness that's around it, and that's what they call the smoke ring. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see it on the top there a little bit. But here, Ellie, you want to try it? You want to take some? How is it?
Good.
Okay. It's good that you didn't tell me that was terrible. Yeah. So this one here does, like, so you can see some spots where I didn't quite cut enough of the fat off, which you could always trim off after. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I went through a lot of briskets that came out really bad. Like I said, my family suffered through those. So we didn't waste them. Another great thing to do if you make a really big brisket is chili. Chili is a great thing for brisket. Even if you make brisket that doesn't quite, it comes out a little bit tough. If you go ahead and use it in a chili, it kind of revives it. So you could always save the brisket that you made and make it into a chili. I've got a chocolate chipotle chili recipe that I could also provide too. That works really well with just straight ground beef or with brisket. So if you're gonna make a brisket, make a big one and make some chili for after. And that's all that I had. Any other questions from anybody? No, I guess not.
Thank
What
you.
kind of,
Could I make
kind of, oh, sorry.
No, this was
No, I was just going to make a comment that when you talk about the holidays or Pesach, is I will often, it's the oven method, but I will do the cooking until you need to take it out. And I take it out and slice it and put it back in to finish cooking. At that point, I will put it in the freezer. And I do the second cooking the day that I'm going to be serving it. Just helps people save steps for the holidays.
Yeah, definitely. That works really, really well too. Another way too is if you do have a sous vide as well, cutting up the brisket, vacuum sealing it, and then heating it up in there works really, really well too. Since it brings it up to that gradual temperature, it doesn't dry it out or anything. So that works really well as well.
That's actually what I was going to ask you. What kind of sous vide machine do you have? I know there's a lot of different ones right now, and I was actually looking for one, but it's kind of hard to know which one to get.
So that one's is a Jewel.
And he got it online.
Yes. So a Jewel and a Nova are the two most common sous vides. I like the Jewel is smaller than the Innova. The Innova is a little bit bigger. A lot of people say that they don't like the Jewel because you can only control it with your phone. It has no display to change the to see what the temperature is or to control it. So I can see that as being a bit of a downfall. But the Innova does have a screen on top that you can adjust. But usually once you set it, you don't have to do anything with it. But it's really helpful. We went out of town last week with a bunch of friends, and I made tri-tip, put it in the sous vide, let it sit and cook for 10 hours. And then you take it out, you dry it off, season it up, and all you do is you sear it on a grill or sear it in a cast iron skillet, and it comes out great. It cooks evenly. It's a great way to cook meat and chicken and fish and vegetables as well. So I would highly suggest a sous vide. If you don't have one, if you want to try to borrow one from someone and give it a shot, but they're really good. So. Any other questions?
Matt, I have a question. How many pounds of brisket do you recommend for like 2 to 3 people?
For 2 to 3 people, I think it's I think the rule is a ½ pound to like 3/4 of a pound per person. So
That's how much he does.
Is that before cooking?
yes, yeah, I believe that's what that is. I usually err on the side of the 3/4. You don't want to have, it's better to have too much than too little. You could always freeze it. You could always make chili. So brisket never goes to waste. I guess unless you totally destroy it, then it can go to waste. But yeah, that's kind of the rule of thumb.
Matt, when you use it for chili, what do you do? Like grind it up?
No, just cube it up.
Cube it up.
Is like kind of like this side. I mean, this is a piece of fat, but kind of like this side, little cubes. Works best. Just cube it up, and then you cook it in chili just like you normally would. But like normally when if you make chili, say with ground beef, you first put the beef in, brown it, and then put everything in. So you could put the brisket in. You can get it a little bit warm, then put everything else in and just let it simmer. You can use some of your leftover fat as kind of like the oil in it. Instead of putting oil to cook it in there, you just put some of the fat. Makes your house smell like
Like
meat. But it comes out really good, and that works out really, really well. A really tasty chili. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, one of the things I like to do with leftover smoked brisket is I love to make a hash and do a breakfast with it. It's really yummy.
Oh yes, yeah. Brisket hash is delicious. Totally worth it. Trying to think what else you can make. You can make a lot of different things, but hash is also really good. Chili, tacos. Yes. Oh yeah. Breakfast tacos awesome. I love good breakfast tacos. So that's one thing. Jack's Barbecue in Soto has good breakfast tacos. Or if you go to Texas, there's plenty of places that have good breakfast tacos. I love breakfast tacos. Just some potatoes and some brisket and some eggs in a tortilla, a nice warm tortilla with some salsa and hot sauce is delicious.
I choke on the meat.
Yes, I know you don't really like it that much, but yeah. So like I said, I'm always down for talking about barbecue. So my contact information's on the presentation. So reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to talk about barbecue. So thank you.